The government should start waking up and smelling the coffee and deciding that home delivery is not such a bad thing at all, and it's a natural extension for this industry. And the technology is available today. There are interested parties who are willing to come. There is a whole new world of entrepreneurs who can add more value to the government in this process. So governments will hopefully keep it sustainable and keep this as a long-term thing and not just as a COVID thing. But again, the laws have to change. Then once it goes, right now the governments are having a field day because they are acting under the disaster management principles. So they have absolutely great control. There is no free movement of people. There is so they have much more in control than ever before. So right now, whatever actions are taken, nobody's there to question them. But when it comes to regular legislative work, I'm sure they will have to consult other political parties. It has to get approved on the floor of the House, and they have to change the act and the rules. So it will go through its own turbulence, but I'm sure the larger wisdom and the need for a service like this will prevail over all other factors.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on episode 13 of Stars and Startups. I'm your host, Varun Vumidi. Today we explore the world of alcohol and how an app from Chennai is making it possible to buy alcohol from your neighborhood wine shops, as well as enabling deliveries for these shop owners. Anything to do with alcohol supply chain has posed huge challenges in India. Prasanna Natarajan is the founder of Hip Bar and also a distillery in Goa. Prasanna and I chat about the state of country spirits and the business of delivering alcohol. Let's jump straight into this conversation. At a moment where people are seeing images of hundreds of people standing in line at alcohol shops, people are hoarding beers and liquor in their cabinets, opening up like their most precious um, collection of from their mini bars, right? It's a very interesting time we're catching up. So I really wanted to have you on the show and talk about the state of the nation in alcohol and you know uh, because you've been up to some really fun things. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Varun.
So you're currently based in Chennai, uh,
Yes.
but you actually went to Goa for some time. Um,
Yeah,
and,
I
and
did. I went to Goa, set up a small craft distillery, and then wanted to cart around vodka and sell it in Goa and kind of settle down. Uh, we employ all 100% locals. In fact, I am the only so-called outsider, but I've never felt as an outsider in Goa, and that soil has treated us well, and we are grateful to the great people of Goa because they. I've never had to lock my factory or house or any of those things because nothing gets taken away by anybody, and uh, we have a bunch of people who've been with us for the last 12 years.
so
So
tell me
we are in a
something.
good
I'm
place.
I'm 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 a little lost here. So you decided to go to Goa, right? Did you do and then you started this distillery, right?
Yeah.
Have
I went with a Gurkha. Actually, me and a Gurkha from Chennai went. And obviously, I have a limitation in terms of language. I can't speak Hindi or any other language other than Tamil and English. I can't speak anything else. So that with that handicap, I had to go with somebody who could speak Hindi and also talk to me in Tamil. Or so I took a Gurkha with me in an Air India flight, and we both landed up in Goa. I looked for an apartment, and we got an apartment. We moved there, and then kind of that guy who used to be the watchman of the place that I just had recently bought, and also kind of supervise the building of the factory. And this was in 2007, 2008. So Goa has changed substantially from that time to now. And yeah, we got along. We strung together a bunch of great people through references predominantly, got out, and made friends, and have a 40-member team there, and which I'm quite proud of.
so this is Sipping Spirits. This is the company that you started, the distillery. And what were you guys
Yes.
making? Were you guys making Fenny?
No, we actually at the time uh, made vodka and imported and bottled tequila. So essentially, it was set up as a as a unit which will cater to the slightly discerning class of consumers for these white spirits categories of goods, typically vodka, gin, tequila, and what gin is today, vodka was 10 years ago. That was the in drink at the time. And and also white spirits as a category was more open to new brands being embraced by consumers. The consumers were not as pricky with their brands as they were in other categories like rum or whiskey. So we thought that that is a good way to start, and we found a joint venture with the Melchers Group from Netherlands, who developed the recipe and the process, and they gave it to us, and we bottled the Resolute, the pink vodka and the black vodka. So we had three variants of the same product, because it helps us to reach more customers. At that time, the black vodka was kind of in thing, where there was another popular brand called Blaud. So we thought we will have variants of that. But then as I got into it, I figured that there were uh, you know as a category, alcoholic beverages had its own set of unique challenges, and they were endemic across the industry, whether big or small industry. They still had the same problems. So for example, at that time, we used to remember when we used to send a truck out to another state where we intended to sell the products. It used to be going along with like a telephone directory of papers that will accompany every consignment. It had to have a pass, import export pass, then insurance of the vehicle, then the invoice in triplicate, the EVC from the excise department. So it was a very cumbersome. It continues to be a cumbersome process, except that um, different states have started introducing digital interventions in obtaining the permits. So in fact, West Bengal used to have a very unique system, that you had to either opt for a 9-ton vehicle or a 16-ton vehicle, and you have to even specify whether it is a Tata or an Ashok Leyland at the time of sending out the requirement. So it was not so it was a very it was very, very prescriptive policy. I think it was more geared for times when you could not track and trace vehicles, and there was a lot more room for leakages. But I think now the systems have changed.
But was it like that one of the highest consuming states in the country?
Which one?
West Bengal.
No, see, West Bengal is not the highest. Would be Tamil Nadu in the new current form. Earlier, it used to be the United Andhra with Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. We guys couldn't beat you guys on that one. So, but the other states are. I mean, the south of India would contribute to about 60% of the volume, because in North Indian states still country liquor is available. So country liquor is the rectified spirit, which is like almost like the first distillate, and a lot of times people have that. That is the desi daru. It's an inferior quality of spirit being used, obviously without too much of purification, but it still works because it costs less and it gives people the bang for the buck. So it's still you consumed in North India. Northeast India again has some traditional cultural distillates, and also with a very highly, socializing population in Northeast. So they have, their own unique products. They have, beers which are native to that area.
Right, they use yam, tapioca, and other stuff, right? Do they actually sell that, or it goes back as just white spirits?
So it, as far I think it is more or less goes as white spirit only, because they have absolutely. I haven't tasted much of that spirit. The best I have gone to is the Kurki rum that used to come from Sikkim. Then the Dansberg beer also that comes from there, somewhere made up there. But I haven't tried any of the other distillates that they make locally.
Oh, interesting. And it does get bottled though.
Mostly it doesn't, because one of the problems in our country is that we have this classification called Indian made foreign spirits. So any indigenous cultural distillate does not find favor to be put under that nomenclature. So, for example, there are the Goan Feni is there. It is classified as a country spirit. You have Mahua liqueur, which another good friend Desmond is doing it at a very very serious level. He's put in so much efforts to ensure that the tribal spirit which is native to India is also coming to the forefront, and it doesn't find favor because it's not unfortunately classified as a foreign liquor. So the Indian mentality is that we would much rather go for a like a really rundown version of a foreign spirit than promote something native, and that's typically because we we have surrendered our own sense of belonging to this particular identity of products made for India, made by India.
But like I would imagine excise and other guys want to create these categories because I mean it does generate a lot of revenue for them. So aren't they pushing for changes in this?
Nobody wants to progressively change the alcohol industry because it'll be great for them, but it will be not good for the voter. So therefore, any progressive steps they take towards improvement of alcohol will maybe counterproductive for them from a political mileage point of view. But I think this is one of the areas which definitely see on when you talk about indigenous native cultural distillates. The problem is scale. If you are able to operate at scale, then only you can invest in a brand building for that particular product or identity. For example, tequila still has so much of tequila made, even though it's in a small area, and it's a cultural distillate. They have developed standards. They have a code for manufacturers. They have a code for importers. Then there is, what they have done is taken a very good cultural distillate and brought it out as a very, they've created a culture around tequila. There are restaurants that focus on menus centered around tequila. So I also, there are like Scotch, they have tasting sessions with tequila. So we need to also create an industry which actually promotes the indigenous and the native spirits in India. Uh,
These
and
tequila
I think
restaurants are they primarily you're talking about abroad, like in the US and
yeah,
other
yeah.
countries? Because I remember the last time I was in Mexico, I think even mezcal was something that was trying to become a lot more popular as a spirit. I think it's made from the same plant.
Yeah, but not in the Guadalajara region. So yeah, mezcal is also it's like it's outside the zone of where the GI tag lies, which is within the the district of Guadalajara. With mezcal, I think because they have a tequila is not available in very large quantity, and they don't want to dilute the the process and the identity of the product. So I think they came up smartly with a tier two product, which is mezcal, and it still does the job. Mostly what happens is, uh, you know, other products which don't have the geographical indication gets passed off as the main product. So when you're ordering a margarita and you really don't care what tequila goes in, sometimes, no, I don't say all the times, but sometimes the alternative is also used. So mm, but overall I think the key thing to understand from the Mexican experience is that there is definitely space for native spirits and India, but has to take it with a lot of pride because we want to suppress our identity as a country that was once made drinks. So
Yeah,
we
you bring up an interesting point, right? Because if you think about it, some of the stories that I've read about tequila and mezcal, all of that, there's been a real effort to actually spread the word and, like you say, pairings, get people to try it, taste it, try the different types of it, and of course, each of it has its own unique flavors and other things. Whereas when you go to Goa itself, and when you ask for Feni, or either the packaging is not great, or people tell you, oh, you'll get a terrible hangover right after. and there's a lot of these negative kind of sentiments also that gets attached to it.
Because the product is positioned inferiorly to the low standard IMFL products. So if you look at a country liquor, if you tag it as country liquor, that's a good bad start, from the day go. So, and then on top of it, you price it lower than the cheapest of IMFL products.
Right.
Then naturally it gets relegated in the own mind space of people. So instead of focusing, but I'm sure that there are companies which have come into the space, which have taken the initiative to make craft better products,
Is that
better
Kazulo?
brands.
Kazulo.
Kazulo is one.
Kazulo, I
is
think
definitely.
they're doing what, cashew fenny, coconut. I've tasted a few. I think somebody
They are
introduced me
very
to
good.
it.
They are very good. Yeah, they are quite good. In fact, earlier I used to go to Goa and bring my own bottles back to Chennai. Now, whenever I go, I bring Kazulo and the others because they make much better sense to gift to people, right? So, yeah, I think the main key thing is that you need to have volume. There should be sufficient supply of the raw material, base material, for it to warrant an industry. Otherwise, it will remain a cottage industry. It will remain under the radar, and it becomes very dysfunctional. So if somebody has to take, it's a good 6 to 7 year process for any industry to be coming up with such standards. But the work should have started 5 years ago and not today.
See, I mean, when when I had gone to Goa as well, and my wife started to like Kazulo, we tried a couple of pennies, and I brought some back, and we started spreading the word. Right, we started showing it to people, taking it to parties, entertaining with Kazulo. They actually enjoyed it. Right, it's a whole experience. I think the first time I had Kazulo was. I
It's
think they did.
slightly on the edge. You like it or you hate it, but
Yeah.
it's that way, very very crystal clear, and you don't have to. There are no shades of gray when it comes to wine. Or sorry, Fenny.
No, but
Fenny, yeah.
but the interesting part was that people enjoy, like, at least they like the new experience, right? To your point, like, you have to show it in a good light, uh, to for people to take it seriously as well.
Mm.
And I think the second part of that is, if you want it now, it's not possible to have to go to Goa every time to want to get a piece of a country alcohol that you may enjoy. So I can't go online, and we're living in that digital age now that I can say, hey, I can order for a toothbrush, which will probably get shipped to me from a warehouse in somewhere. Why can't I get something that I enjoy and I want to entertain with, and I'm willing to pay, right?
A very good question to ask, because why can't there be free movement of alcohol between one state to the other? And why can't people pay the taxes of the respective states if they have to get it in a, get any product of their choice as a mail order business, for example, So obviously this will happen eventually in India, but I think the, there is so much of insecurity amongst existing trade, players in the existing framework of the system, the governments, and how there could be, when they open up something legitimately, the government fears that what happens when there is when there is a parallel trade also happening, which is not coming under the formal sector. Like when you supply one, when you give permission to somebody to do mail order business, what happens when others do it and you are not able to track it? So there are always doubts, but I think the government's job is to keep these systems clean and not not curtail the creativity in business. They should find ways and means to cover and regulate new businesses rather than say no to them. And the liquor industry has always heard no's, big no's always. And so that is the reason why very good products which are made elsewhere are not available to the rest of us.
Which is so counterintuitive, because you have duty free shops, right, which where you're able to buy all kinds of alcohol at insane prices, but typically local stuff doesn't get easily accessed, right? Uh, but I think the question is when you got into this business in 2007, 2008, um, you knew there was going to be a lot of
I
work with
didn't
the
know. I
government.
didn't.
Okay,
I
you
didn't
didn't
know.
know.
I didn't know. If I had known, or if I had got better counsel, I perhaps wouldn't have come into the business. But this is one business where there are more things that you should be. You should know what not to do than what to do, because the what not to do is what will hurt you. And so there are plenty of things. Obviously, my stint in this business has been like a extension of my education. And as somebody who's waved at trucks to stop them and to load our products, to waiting at the excise commissioner's office, to handling distributors, and dealing with governments, and inspections, raids. So this is a business for the slightly tough people, I would say. And well, even if you don't enter it tough, it'll toughen you up. So that is the other good thing about it. So when I got in, obviously I got into it with naivety, and any other way I wouldn't have been able to get a start into this business. So which is why many times when people come and ask me, should I, they all get enthused about starting new line of liquor, or starting a new brand. I always tell them, if you're really passionate about it, don't ask for advice as to whether you should do it or not. So that is not an advice I can give for you. Basically, the industry has now, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's become a big MNC driven business. It's no more a indigenous Indian business, because all the top companies are slots are taken by international companies, and there is a high investment requirement. There is a high working capital requirement. There is a high, very very high holding costs of inventory, especially on aged products. So only very large companies with very large resources can do business in a holistic sense. But companies which have the ability to create great brand value, like what Bira has done, or what Saint Germain had done in the US, in liqueurs, and what Bira has done here, and some of the other companies that are trying to do. I think they all deserve a shout, because they have gotten into a very very challenging business with the sole focus on product differentiation and quality. So we have to give it to them for taking that step.
So let's quickly jump into HIPAA, right? How did transition from owning a distillery, running this in Goa, and then moving to HIPAA and coming to Chennai, back to Chennai, back home? How did this transition happen? And what was your big insight that you wanted to go build this? Because I know that HIPAA is probably the only company that can also collect payments for alcohol in the country. Hey guys, are you enjoying the podcast? Do you want to keep updated when I release new episodes? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening to this podcast. And also do leave an email on stars.substack.com so that I inform you on email when a new episode drops. Okay, back to the show.
So with Hibar, yeah, I had cut my teeth in the industry, and I had seen the ups and downs, as a hands-on entrepreneur, and I felt that I was missing out both as a customer and as a businessman on the opportunities that could come about in this sector. And obviously, if at all anything we can be accused of was trying a bit too early. So in 2015, I decided to start Hibbar. The name Hibbar itself, I was jamming with another friend, and he was the one who came up with the name. I looked up for the name Hibbar.com. It said it was taken. And at that time, name.com used to have something called as the nabber service. So you pay money, and when somebody drops the name, they will nab it for you. So the nabber service, I put in, I think it was $949, and the domain name was expiring on 4th of December. And I had around that time, I had 2-3 days before that, I had put in this request for nabbing that name. And then at the middle of the night on 4th, I think I got an email saying that we've nabbed your name. We are processing your payment for $949. I said, take it in. That's how I looked at that as a signal, and then got the domain name, and then decided to start the business actually. So originally the idea was not to go after home delivery like we are currently doing. That idea has, our idea was originally to create a bar on the cloud and then let people drink from it from their own bottles from different bars, and create an experience like, you go to the bar, order your drink, and walk out without having to make any payments, because you know what you want. You are not a drinker who's flirting with the menu. If you're a, so this is for a serious connoisseur,
You
kind of
wanted to
service.
do a Uber experience in the bar uh, business.
Yeah, so the original tagline for Hibbar was "Bar on the Cloud." So, and we dabbled with the name Cloud Bar, which also we own as a trademark and as a domain. But we dabbled with the idea whether we should go with Hibbar or Cloud Bar, and people felt that it was better to go with Hibbar because shorter name and better name. And yeah, it was. So the Uber experience was kind of an inspiration. Nobody can doubt that we are all experienced magic for the first time in our lives, and Uber and all these guys came about. So I thought maybe with the drinks business, considering that you know the most of the very nice places people don't go to because it's not crowded enough, and unlike in other places, a bar or a nightclub is a place where builds its audience based on who's already there and what kind of crowd goes there. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring in the crowd to all those places which were otherwise good but did not have the patronage. And so, how many of us can really afford to have two drinks at at a Leela or an ITC? So we thought that we will create that possibility, and without obviously diluting the brand quotient of any of these places, create a good tech product that will kind of make it all good for everyone. So that was the thought process. But again, uh, uh, we did during the IPL, the very first year we launched, we created for the first time where 50 bars participated in Bangalore, and we came up with identical prices across the bars. So where it used to be called as one city, one price, and irrespective of which of the partners, it could be a very fancy bar or a or a bar that you go to every other day. Both of them had same prices on the set of products. So these are some of the experiments we did, but we soon realized that this is something which can happen later, but not now. The right now for us to immediately go after was a problem which was part of the original thinking. We just resequenced it because we thought we will first go with the bar on the cloud and then go for delivery. But the delivery opportunity came when the Supreme Court had ruled that all the highway shops have to be closed, and that resulted in Bangalore losing 60% of their stores because MG Road was considered as a national highway, and other arterial roads were classified as state highways. So they lost a lot of shops, and that time we went and offered the solutions. At that time, I remember, Oberoi and Taj on MG Road did not have their bars open.
This
So,
was in 2017, right?
yeah,
17 or where there was a court decision to do that,
yeah,
and there was a lot of confusion around that ruling, and which resulted in a
correct.
lot of bars being closed.
2016 December was the judgment of the Supreme Court, which was watered down by the subsequent judgments on the same matter by the Supreme Court. So really, it all went back to the same place where it started. Everybody started running the shops. So, which is so at that time we got the window of opportunity to pitch for home delivery with the Bangalore government. We went with a full sense of we went in knowing fully well that we have to do everything at our own cost and make sure that we are transparent. We prove that it can work, and a formal system is better than the informal system that was already prevalent. Because and to deliver a drink with dignity instead of asking a favor from a liquor shop or being overcharged. So we wanted to make sure if you're already paying so much money, and if it is already duty paid alcohol, we thought that a simpler system of home delivery is a basic need. and that is why we took all the legal precaution, did the business, still yet faced, despite getting permissions from the concerned departments, uh, as it would happen, the governments did a volte face and turned back to say that their own actions were wrong, and this had to be shut. But the good thing is that the matter is still in the court, and we are very positive that we will succeed in that litigation. And that didn't stop us from obviously not trying. We did try in other places. We ran experiments. Our mobile payment network is operating in 4 states, where we have very good, relationship with the retailers.
So what is that business like? So you just are able to transact at liquor shops?
No,
At
you can
beer shops?
pre-order. You can pre-order, prepay, and go pick it up. So it is a system where you don't have to spend time at the store. You can just go pick it up and come. And so because home delivery, that last piece is still the missing link as to whether it is legally possible or not. For that, the courts are in adjudication. Right now, with COVID, obviously everything has changed. So now it's come a whole, it's turned a new page.
In this scenario, so you have this product that you've created, which where you can book the alcohol on the phone. You can go and collect it. Uh, has have states adopted the product very easily, or you're saying you only have what
So that
four?
doesn't require any adoption, because there is nothing wrong we are doing under the law. So the question is whether we wanted to grow. See, our basic premise at that point in time was to use the payment fabric and build it on top of that a home delivery system. It was only because you have to realize that this industry is far, far behind than other conventional industries. There is no digital intervention at a liquor store for various reasons, including that transparency will sometimes can work against the owner. So some level of opaqueness is good for that business. So they never had a good system of stock keeping. So unlike in other places where efficiency is what everybody is looking for, in this business, efficiency is a casualty. So considering all that, we wanted to do first train the stores to get into a digital mode, and then show them that it is not actually bad for them, because fortunately or unfortunately there are platforms that have become quite big, and where they have they have uh, uh, they have baggage. Let me put it simply, and that baggage is something that uh, when you start without knowing what it is, many people sign up. But once you become a certain size, then people have no choice. So this industry does not want to suffer that onslaught, because it's seen that happening in another industry. And most of the restaurant owners are also liquor shop owners, so they know how these platforms operate, and so they're very, very suspectful about digital players coming in. And as we speak, that resistance is there everywhere.
So I'm guessing you're talking specifically about Swiggy and Zomato in this case. Uh,
Yes.
So there seems to be a lot of pushback. I think even from store owners, like you're saying. What's the biggest pushback? Because I see they do have a good delivery system. They have the money to go after governments and maybe get you know
Sweetheart
decisions in their
deals.
favor.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, no. That their biggest strength is their systems. They're already doing the same thing, picking up and dropping off stuff. There are varying interests, and there are traditional business rights that are accrued upon generations who have been in the same trade. So for them, they don't. This is their sole, livelihood opportunity. So they don't want this to be upset. So the pushback is about what happens when there are favorites. Unlike in a real world where you're sitting looking for a MTR masala dosa, you cannot serve it from another place. You can't serve it from a Nadia roundabout, because the taste varies, the product varies, the pricing varies. Whereas in the case of alcoholic beverage, it's packaged goods. So you don't have to necessarily say, I want my drink only from this particular store. You don't do that. So the restaurants are worried that there could be divisions created. Yeah, collusion, or whichever way one looks at it, the free market principles will no more be good when disruption happens. So our Hibbar's own ethos is that we are not there to disrupt anything. We are not a disruptor at all. Home delivery of alcohol cannot be called disruption. It is a basic service. And if restaurants and if bars or retailers want to do it by themselves, we provide them with very basic set of tools. We are compassionate about their situation. So we have to. Hibbar has much more responsibility to ensure that whether Swiggy, Zomato come in or not, we are there to service the interest of the retailers and help them to service their own customers. Because so that is one of the goalposts we have, is to keep the retailer community happy and predictable about our own actions, whether we are big or small.
Hibbar today works with a lot of manufacturers, right? Directly with the. Is there a play there?
We don't work. No, we have originally, when we were a bar proposition, yes, but as we have rolled along to become a delivery enabler, we obviously, there are questions always posed about Diageo investing in Hibbar and whether we are biased as an organization, whether we are there to bat for them. So we've always told that they're first amongst equals, and we treat all industry players equally. And nobody has a uh, nobody can write the policy of how we behave with our customers or with our manufacturing partners or with the retailers. We independently decide, and personally, we make sure that we are equidistant and fair to everyone. And that is one of the key, cultural ethos that we at Hibbar have, enshrined ourselves in.
I would imagine when you took that check, you were considering like, okay, how does this play out? Because it can be, favoritism, etc. Or that never
It
crossed your
played out
mind.
exactly as anticipated. It played out exactly as anticipated. Personally, I had anticipated whatever fallout and everything has to be done. The only thing I couldn't predict was COVID, and so that whatever work we have put in the last 5 years, the COVID has brought it, made a new turn and made it even more, compulsive for us to have been in this business. So.
So, are you working with more governments now? I mean, are they more receptive at the moment? How is that
Yes,
kind of?
they are more receptive. They're whatever apprehensions they had. Now they are open to hearing because their own revenues are getting affected. Forget social distancing. Even otherwise, they need more revenues. So the only way you can, tax Indians is indirectly and through products they love and buy, and alcohol happens to be one of them. And the governments have already imposed a lot of taxes on alcohol across the states. And while I personally believe it's very, very bad policy making, because what this industry has shown is that it's a price inelastic demand, and so there is, the more you burden the drinker, the more his family will suffer, because whatever food money was kept for other essentials and staples is going to be diverted to purchasing alcohol, and in that the state is the big winner, because whatever they buy, they pay 10 to 15% to the manufacturer, and the rest of the price that you pay go to the government and the value chain. So, being the biggest benefactor of the drinking habit, the state should have reacted and acted more responsibly, knowing fully well that by increasing price, they are not going to be keeping away drinkers. So, but every time that bluff is never called out, but it's just a playbook. Whenever they run out of money, they go and shake up the drinker.
So, but I mean, in that case, there is going to still be a flip flop, right? Because it has happened before, where they've approved, they've accepted to work, and create these, new technologies available. Is there always a concern that they're going to retract on that? post-COVID? I mean, if there is ever post-COVID world.
You can expect anything, and you particularly whatever you don't expect is more likely to happen, because that is the way our understanding of this industry is. So it's until things stabilize. Unfortunately, we don't want stability at the cost of continued lockdown and continued COVID inflicted times. But ideally, the government should start waking up and smelling the coffee and deciding that home delivery is not such a bad thing at all, and it's a natural extension for this industry. And the technology is available today. There are interested parties who are willing to come. There is a whole new world of entrepreneurs who can add more value to the government in this process. So governments will hopefully keep it sustainable and keep this as a long-term thing and not just as a COVID thing. But again, the laws have to change. Then once it goes, right now the governments are having a field day because they are acting under the disaster management principles. So they have absolutely great control. There is no free movement of people. There is so they have much more in control than ever before. So right now, whatever actions are taken, nobody's there to question them. But when it comes to regular legislative work, I'm sure they will have to consult other political parties. It has to get approved on the floor of the House, and they have to change the act and the rules. So it will go through its own turbulence, but I'm sure the larger wisdom and the need for a service like this will prevail over all other factors.
Would this result in HipBar actually also doing deliveries for uh, the bars, or this was at the
No,
alcohol
we
shops?
have, for example, we started our service in Orissa yesterday, and Orissa we have. So we have a model where we empower the retailers to do the delivery in batches, and either the same day or next day, depending on what kind of fleet they want to deploy. Or we also help them with the manpower to do the deliveries. So we provide them an alternative that they don't have to feel so alienated when Swiggy or Zomato is not there. And our world is much more fairer, and we work on uh, much lesser margins and much lesser aspirations, because we know that the retailer's margin is only so much. We have to work. We are not here to dominate. We are here to facilitate.
So in this scenario, HipBar has now become a hyper local bar than a cloud bar.
No, so yeah, we dropped the cloud bar on the cloud tagline much earlier because we were getting into more serious stuff. So the brand also has turned around because we are more for responsible consumption, more for the delivery enablement, more. So we are no more so attracted to the marketing side of things, because personally I feel that with technology we can bring about a renaissance of the drinking culture in India. And, for the first time, a whole new generation of people can be digitally, moderated. And state should not lose that opportunity for other partisan reasons. So, we have become much more from a flashy, marketing-oriented company to a much more compliant and it's almost like running an ambulance service. It's a serious job, so we take it seriously and we want to do that.
Are you hiring at the moment?
I think across the board we are hiring on business development fronts, on tech, predominantly on market development and technologies where we are hiring. Do reach out to us, wherever you are. We are quite open to having people. Never see the people that we work with. So long as we are all aligned to the same goal, we are good to go.
Hey, Prasanna, this has been amazing. Thanks for all the insights. I think our audience would have learned a lot about the industry. May hopefully even picked up, on a couple of things and maybe use it in their own businesses.
Good talking to you, Varun. And whenever HipBar is around you, use the app and share it with your friends.
Thanks, Prasanna. Keep people happy. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Varun.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Stars and Startups with me, Varun Vumidi. Thanks for listening to the show. Subscribe and get intimated whenever we launch a new episode. I strongly urge you to subscribe to the podcast via our Substack link, stars.substack.com. Okay, see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.